Have you ever noticed how your investment spreadsheet says you should be wealthy by now, but your bank balance still leaves you feeling anxious? If you've mastered your contributions and diversification, but the needle on your actual wealth hasn't moved, you're not getting the math wrong. You're just ignoring the one variable the financial industry never taught you how to measure. In today's video, we're uncovering exactly what's blocking your growth. And I promise you, it's not your portfolio's return rate. My name is Ely, and I spend way too much time thinking about how people in the US experience money psychologically. If you're someone who earns a normal income, maybe even more than you used to, but still doesn't feel financially secure, hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Because what we're about to talk about doesn't show up in investing courses. It doesn't come up in podcasts about index funds or YouTube videos about the 4% rule. It lives in the gap between what your spreadsheet says and what your bank account reflects. And that gap? It has a name. Here's the thing. Most personal finance content assumes that once you understand the math, the behavior follows. Learn about compound interest, automate your 401k, max out your Roth IRA, and wealth is just a matter of time. And look, that framework isn't wrong. The math is real. Compound interest does work. But somewhere between knowing the strategy and actually building wealth, millions of Americans hit a wall. Not because they lack discipline, not because they chose the wrong ETF, but because the financial industry spent decades teaching you how to invest and almost no time teaching you how your brain responds to money under pressure. Let's start with a number that should make you pause. According to the Federal Reserve's 2023 report on the economic well-being of U.S. households, roughly 37% of American adults say they would struggle to cover an unexpected $400 expense. Not $4,000, $400. Now think about who makes up that 37%. It's not only people living below the poverty line. A significant portion of that group earns between $40,000 and $80,000 a year. These are people with jobs, people with 401k contributions, people who read personal finance articles and still feel like they're one car repair away from a bad month. Here's what most people don't realize. Financial anxiety doesn't scale with income the way we expect it to. The American Psychological Association has tracked stress in America for years, and money consistently ranks as the top source of stress for U.S. adults, even during periods of economic growth. Even when unemployment was near record lows. Even when the stock market was hitting all-time highs. People were still stressed about money. That tells us something important. It tells us that the problem is not purely economic. It's psychological. And until we treat it that way, the math alone will never be enough. So what's actually happening? Let's walk through a scenario that is going to feel uncomfortably familiar. Someone starts their career earning $45,000 a year. Life is tight, but manageable. They share an apartment, drive an older car, eat out occasionally. They're making it work. Then they get a raise. Now they're at $58,000. And something interesting happens. Instead of widening the gap between income and expenses, which is the only move that actually builds wealth, they narrow it. The apartment becomes a one-bedroom. The older car gets replaced. The occasional dinner out becomes a habit. The streaming services multiply. None of these are outrageous decisions. Every single one feels justified. But the result is that the financial breathing room the raise was supposed to create quietly disappears. This is not a character flaw. This is what psychologists call lifestyle inflation. And it is one of the most reliably predictable patterns in American consumer behavior. And here's where it gets interesting. It doesn't just happen when people get raises. It happens when people feel like they deserve more. And in a country built on the idea that upward mobility is both possible and expected, that feeling arrives early and stays late. Now you might be thinking, okay, but lifestyle inflation is well documented. Everyone talks about it. Why are people still falling for it? And that's a fair question. The answer comes down to something deeper than awareness. It comes down to identity. In the United States, the things you buy are not just purchases. They're signals. Your car, your neighborhood, your phone, your vacations. These communicate something to the people around you. And perhaps more importantly, they communicate something to yourself. When someone earns $75,000 a year and lives like someone who earns $55,000, it creates a kind of internal friction, a sense that the life they're living doesn't match the life they feel entitled to. And that friction is uncomfortable enough that most people resolve it by spending up rather than saving up. The Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey consistently shows that American households in the middle-income range, roughly $50,000 to $100,000, spend between 90 and 100% of their after-tax income. Not because they are irresponsible, because the cost of maintaining a credible middle-class life in the United States, rent or mortgage, health insurance, car payments, childcare, groceries, has increased faster than wages for most of the last 2 decades. The treadmill is real, and it's getting faster. Here's the thing that trips people up most. They assume that financial security is primarily a function of income. Make more money, feel more secure. But research consistently challenges this assumption. A well-known study from Princeton looked at the relationship between income and emotional well-being and found that beyond roughly $75,000 a year, a number that has been updated closer to $100,000 in more recent work, additional income provides diminishing returns on day-to-day happiness. After a certain point, more money doesn't make you feel more financially safe. What makes you feel safe is the gap between what comes in and what goes out. And that gap is a behavior problem, not an income problem. Now, this is where the investing piece becomes almost ironic. Think about someone who has been faithfully contributing to their 401k for 5 years. They've done everything right on paper. They've read about diversification. They rebalance annually. They ignored the noise during market corrections. They have a plan, and yet they still feel financially anxious. Why? Because the money inside the 401k doesn't feel real in the present tense. It lives in the future. But the $1 for $100 rent payment is very real. The $480 car payment is very real. The $350 grocery bill is very real. The $180 they spent on random Amazon purchases last month, also very real. The 401k is abstract. The present-day cash flow is immediate. And the human brain, when under stress, prioritizes the immediate over the abstract every single time. This is actually rooted in neuroscience. The brain's threat response system, the part that fires when you feel financial pressure, doesn't distinguish well between a lion and a late bill. Stress activates survival mode thinking, and survival mode thinking is not built for long-term planning. It's built for right now, which means that the more financially stressed someone feels, the harder it becomes for them to make the kind of patient, strategic decisions that actually build wealth. The anxiety creates a cognitive tax that quietly undermines the very discipline required to escape it. The APA refers to this as a stress performance spiral. Financial stress reduces decision-making quality. Poor decisions worsen financial outcomes. Worse outcomes create more stress. And round it goes. Understanding this spiral doesn't make it disappear, but it does change how to approach solving it. Let's talk about comparison, because no conversation about money psychology in America is complete without it. The United States has a unique cultural relationship with visible wealth. Social media has accelerated something that was already baked into the culture, the constant, ambient awareness of how your financial life stacks up against everyone else's. And here's the deeply frustrating part. You're not comparing yourself to your actual peers. You're comparing yourself to the most aspirational, curated version of your extended social network. The friend who just bought a house. The coworker who seems to be traveling every other month. The Instagram account that makes $90,000 look like the floor of a comfortable life rather than a ceiling most households don't reach. The Federal Reserve data shows that the median U.S. household income is around $74,000. The median, meaning half of households, earn less. And yet the cultural narrative around what constitutes a normal financial life is driven by the spending patterns of households earning significantly more than that. When the average person absorbs that narrative, it recalibrates what feels like enough. And when enough keeps moving up, the finish line keeps moving too. Here's a metaphor that might reframe this cleanly. Imagine running a race where someone keeps moving the finish line while you're running. You're not getting slower. You're not getting lazier. The finish line is just further than it was when you started. That is what financial comparison culture does to the average American sense of progress. The metrics shift, the goalposts move, and the runner, exhausted, confused, concludes that they must be doing something wrong, when in reality, they've been running on a track that was designed to feel endless. So what do you actually do with this? Because the goal here is not just to explain why money psychology is hard. The goal is to give you something concrete to work with. The first shift is what could be called a floor-ceiling reframe. Most financial planning focuses on the ceiling, the goal number, the retirement target, the investment milestone. And those things matter. But if you feel financially anxious, the most powerful move is to focus on the floor first. The floor is the minimum you need to feel stable. It's not a number that impresses anyone. It's the number that keeps the lights on, covers the car, handles a $1,000 emergency without panic, and allows you to sleep. Building the floor is not glamorous, but it is the psychological foundation that makes everything else possible. Research in behavioral economics consistently shows that people make better long-term financial decisions from a baseline of perceived stability, even when the actual numbers haven't dramatically changed yet. The floor reduces the cognitive tax of anxiety. The second shift is to treat lifestyle inflation the way you treat a slow gas leak. You can't wait until you smell it to act. You have to assume it's happening and look for it proactively. Every 12 months, a simple and useful exercise is to list every recurring monthly expense and ask one question about each one. Does this cost me more than it did last year? And does the additional cost produce a proportional increase in actual life quality? Not perceived status, not social signaling, just quality. This is not about eliminating pleasure from life. It's about separating the spending that genuinely improves daily experience from the spending that just maintains a social appearance that never needed to be that expensive in the first place. The third shift is about the gap number. The single most important metric in personal finance is not your net worth. It is not your rate of return. It is not your savings rate. It is the monthly dollar gap between what comes in and what goes out. If someone earns $6,000 a month and spends $5,800, their gap is $200. That is an extremely fragile financial position regardless of what their 401k balance is. If that same person, without earning a dollar more, reduces monthly spending to $5,200, their gap becomes $800. That is 4 times the financial breathing room, 4 times the ability to absorb a surprise, 4 times the monthly contribution to actual wealth. The gap number is controllable in ways that income often isn't. And focusing on it builds the psychological sense of agency that financial anxiety tends to erode. Now you might be thinking, this all sounds logical, but it doesn't solve the fact that rent is $2,000, health insurance is $400, and groceries now cost 30% more than they did 4 years ago. And that's a fair and important point. The structural costs in America are real. Inflation in housing, healthcare, and food has outpaced wage growth for a significant portion of workers. That is not a personal failure. It is an economic reality. But even within that reality, there is almost always more room to widen the gap than people initially assume. Not through dramatic sacrifice, but through targeted decisions about the categories where lifestyle inflation tends to accumulate quietly. Subscriptions, food delivery, car upgrades, apartment size, discretionary spending that crept up over time and never got reviewed. The deeper work, and this is where psychology becomes more important than math, is separating what you actually need to feel content from what you've been conditioned to believe you need in order to feel normal. Those are 2 very different numbers. And for most people in the United States, the gap between them is larger than they've ever been encouraged to examine. Here's the calm truth at the end of all of this. Mastering investing is genuinely valuable. Understanding compound interest, diversification, and tax-advantaged accounts is not trivial knowledge. But investing is the engine. Your behavior around cash flow is the fuel. And no matter how well-built the engine is, it cannot run without fuel. The financial industry made a lot of money teaching you about the engine. Almost nobody made money teaching you about the fuel. That's why this content exists. The spreadsheet is not lying to you. The math does work. But between the math and the outcome lives a version of you that is responding to rent pressure, comparison culture, identity signals, and the ambient stress of financial insecurity in ways that no spreadsheet can capture. Addressing that version, understanding why the behaviors keep showing up, is not a soft skill. It is the missing variable. And once you start measuring it, everything else begins to move.